32 ticks following. So they are swallowing. Monkey is swallowing. Snake self swallowing. Next, a swallow 2 will fly and come and swallow. You're ever swallow in a hollow gallow, making a whole lot of halabaloo. Jale kalu, we know say you chop the money some, so give me the loot. Do you really want a revolution or just your turn?
Welcome to Ake Arts and Book Festival 2020 online. My name is Olaokun Soyinka, and I will be moderating the panel discussion on the place of faith in a health crisis. Here to explore the topic with me are Olajide Osunniyi, Ferdinand, Adimefe, and Abdulbasit Kassim. Our panel is very well balanced. Olajide Osunniyi is an Ifa priest from Oyo in Osun State, Nigeria. He lives in Ibadan, Oyo State, and travels between there and the Osun State. He is, I believe, the youngest priest in the country. Ferdinand, also known as Ferdy Adimefe, is a creative industrialist and techpreneur. He is the lead pastor of The Tribe Lagos and The Tribe Abuja, a gospel movement that propagates spirituality as a tool for social consciousness and cultural renewal. Abdulbasit Kassim is pursuing a PhD at the Department of Religion, Rice University in the US. He's also a visiting doctoral fellow at the Institute of Islamic Thought in Africa at Northwestern University. His primary field of research is Islam and African Studies. He is the co-editor of the Boko Haram Reader and the co-author of another book on Boko Haram to be released. Yeah. Welcome, gentlemen. I'm looking forward to our discussion today, Place of Faith in a Health Crisis. And I think, as I mentioned, we are a very well-balanced panel, but I think the least familiar to all of us will be the Ifa religion and the role of an Ifa priest. So, Olajide, if I may start with you, can you just give our viewers an idea of what you do? I believe you're a full-time Ifa priest. That is your entire job.
Yeah. Thank you, everyone. My name is Olajide Osunniyi. Everybody knows me as Oluwo Jogbodorunmila on social media and everywhere. I'm an Ifa priest. I stay in Ibadan, and I'm from Oyo, Osun State. I work as a full-time Ifa priest, and that's what I do. And some people might be wondering what is Ifa and what does that even mean. Ifa is actually a spirituality, the main belief of Yoruba people, our spirituality, our traditions, our culture, our religion is based on Ifa and all the Orishas. So as a priest of Ifa, that's what I do. I'm an Oluwo. Oluwo means the chief priest of a particular city or a village. So I'm a Oluwo of Oyo. So I work for the kings there, to do everything that has to do with Ifa and Orishas for the people. And in Nigeria entirely, I work in Ibadan too. I belong to the temple of Ifa there. They call it Osemeji Temple. That is the founding temple of Ibadan. So that's what I do. I'm an Ifa priest.
For our other panelists, I think we can say we know what a pastor is, and definitely we know what an Islamic scholar does. Maybe if I can move on to you, Ferdy, to ask you, what exactly has your specific ministry been able to do during the COVID health crisis?
Okay, so thank you again for having me. The Tribe Lagos, which is the church I pastor, we're very big on engaging with our communities, because I think faith, whether it is Islam, Christian, or the traditional religion, it's all a desire by humanity to find a connection to something bigger than ourselves, to something higher. And I think in times of crisis, people look to faith to find answers, and faith can provide invaluable resources for us to engage with the fear, the environment. So as a pastor, what I was really big on was, first of all, to encourage people. Nobody knew the answers. Nobody had it all figured out or what was unfolding. So it was important that we're duly informed. And I think for me, we spent time to try to identify what's the nature of this? How do we protect one another? How do we protect ourselves? How do we protect the community? So it was about understanding what was playing out, and we played a role in engaging with our people. And secondly, what we did, we also did a lot of encouragement in the season because people were paralyzed by fear. So it was important to speak to the fear, to once again stir people in hope, knowing that this is not really like the end of the world, or they are not just going to die, but there was hope because at some point it was such a heavy burden and fear. People actually thought they will be dropping dead every other day or just watching everything unfold. So my role was one of inspiration, one of stirring hope in the hearts of people, and in a way coming alongside the government. I think the religious institution can be a powerful ally for governments if we identify that, because people listen a lot to pastors, people listen to their priests or listen to their imams. So it's important that we come alongside governments in driving what will be an effective education and educating people where there's a need for that. So I was very involved, and in ways that we could. I mean, we had places where people couldn't go out, so we did like a food drive, and we put together resources, and we're able to go from place to place, dropping these things and have people pick them up. And it was important that we had to reach people. Some people were out of jobs during the lockdown period. Some businesses just couldn't get a headway. And we needed to be there with what we could and the little we have to bring some kind of support. And we did all of these things during the lockdown.
Well, that's a good example of positive role of faith and religion in community, especially with regard to passing information. If I can move to you, Abdulbasit, we have also seen the opposite. We've seen examples not only of maybe some negative or I would say misleading information from religious leaders, but we've also seen, as already mentioned, people not only paralyzed with fear, but also lashing out because of fear. And I think we saw in some of the northern states, there was quite a bit of civil unrest, with people believing there was some conspiracy or it was some sort of attack from outside of our borders. What role does the cleric in Islam play in calming these fears and not stoking paranoia and fear in the community?
Yes, that's actually a very good question, because the moment the pandemic started, some Muslim scholars actually promoted conspiracy theories, and there was a big debate about contagion. But some other Muslim scholars, they plunged into the corpus of historical texts on plagues, pandemic, because Islam as a religion actually has a rich textual tradition of that's different scholars starting from as far back as the 11th, 12th, 13th centuries that scholars have actually written. So some of these contemporary scholars in the Muslim community, they actually went back to some of these texts to see how the people in the past responded to pandemic. So they were able to challenge their contemporaries or their peers who were promoting conspiracy theories. For example, during the Spanish flu, the 1918 Spanish flu, we had Muslim scholars who actually wrote texts in northern Nigeria and who do not only emphasize the need for prayer, but they also embarked on research. They wrote about medicinal plants within their own environment that people can actually use as a form of remedy or antidote to the pandemic. So some of these historical references actually played a very big role for scholars who use some of these references to douse the tension in the Muslim public, and to also change the perception that this is a pandemic and it has nothing to do with the New World Order, conspiracy theory, the 5G network, so many other forms of conspiracies that people peddled during that pandemic. So I would say that historical reference was actually very important in the Muslim community. And then the ulamas as well, they were also quick to listen And then the government also played a big role. The government intervened for some of these scholars. This is exactly what happened in the Muslim community, in my own opinion.
You mentioned how valuable historical lessons were in helping to cut through the misinformation and the conspiracy theories. And Olajide, if I can come back to you, because I believe history looms very large, takes an important place in the lessons that IFA has for us in what to do during a pandemic and during a time when we're not sure what is going on.
During the time of the pandemic, I have to go back to Osun State to meet the kings and plan. The kings asked me, help me check if what does IFA says about the pandemic, so I have to bring everything down to the theories. During the historical times, then in time of our forefathers, there are a lot of been pandemic going on then. They call it smallpox, champono. A lot of people are aware of that. So the first thing they do is make sure they make everybody stay at home, like we do when the lockdown is going on. They call it Kalijuma Woli in Yoruba, like all the visitors stay at your home. That's the first thing to make sure everything is going. Then they go to the Oro priest. Oro court are like when we are talking about the ambulance, they take the patient. When you are taking a patient to a hospital with ambulance, you put on the siren. Oro is like that. When they put Oro in the city, they make sure everybody stay indoor. That is social distancing. So after that, they now go to meet the Eshu priest. Eshu is the Orisha in forms of the road, the paths. As we know in Yoruba land, Eshu is not Satan. Eshu is the one that owns the road and the path. So they appease Eshu to help them hold the junctions, the paths and the road to the city, so that the pandemic going on in one city will not come to the other city. So after that, they now go back to the Ifa priest, and then they cast Ifa. What is going on? So after they cast Ifa will now give them the instructions on what to do. Example of this can be seen in one Odu or Konomiji when a pandemic hit Ile-Ife, Ile-Ife in Osun State. So Ifa says in the Odu like this, Ifa says, Oyemu, Oye Osanra, Kurukuru, Dama Imailoke, Ako Aparo, Abu Aparo, Wọn Lagbe Lori Sanran. Adifa Olofin. Olofin is known as the king in Ife till now. Olofin run ite, aya rẹ̀ ń sọ gbogbo àrùn, ọ̀kan bí ọmọ wọn ń sàrùn ọ̀rẹ́gẹdẹ kò lè dìde. So this pandemic is going on in the Ife city. They don't know what to do. So now they cast Ifa, what is going on? Ifa says, okay, this is actually Ajogun. It's called virus, Ajogun in Yoruba language. So there's this Ajogun that you don't know what to do about it. What you have to do is separate where you are living from where your wives are to where the children are. After that, make sure the priest get the certain herbs and cleanse your house. After that, now make sure you go to the river. Make sure everybody clean their house. They purify the waters that enter the city. They call it Otororo Mife. This river is the main water they drink then. So they actually find the source of this virus going on, and that is how they actually overcome. So as an Ifa priest, what we do is more than talking to people. We make sure we keep them safe, because in Ifa spirituality, we have the Onisheguns, they are the doctors. We have the Adanshe, they are like the nurse and the health workers. And so we Babalaos, we are like the researchers. So when things like that is going on, we are the one that comes down and be like, okay, let's go back to the primordial time, to check what Oludmare has for us. And when we go back there, we get some facts and medicines and a lot of things to do. So after that, we go around the cities and talk to people. Don't panic. In the language they understand, Ifa is all about the cultures and traditions of the land. So we give them references like during the time and the reign of this so king, particular things like this happen, so you don't have to panic. And we are still here. So we did all these works. Then I went back to Oshun and we did the works with the kings. We barricade the cities. We purify the cities, and we make sure everybody stay at home and stuff. And we give them hope. We talk to them, and everything actually went well. So that is what we did then.
Ferdy, I'd like to come to you now. On the question of information, we've seen how the role of faith in reaching out to the community, in dispelling fears and communicating information, we've seen how useful it can be. But also, some of the religious leaders have been at the forefront of propagating conspiracy theories. And usually it's only religious leaders who can also counter them. They're in the best position. And in the example of Pastor Yakilome, I wasn't aware of so many of his peers standing up to him. What is your view on the role of the religious leaders in countering misinformation on their peers?
Conspiracy theory, it's something that cuts across every religion and pretty much even across different sectors of society. There were people that were just unsure how to deal with the virus. They had different things coming at them. But for me, I think every pastor will respond based on their own understanding. There was a sense that many other people were not willing to counter or speak because they weren't too sure just yet. I mean, even when you look at the scientific unit of how this whole thing was managed, you find different scientific reports contradicting themselves. So it was a very perplexing period. And I wouldn't really say that it was something anyone, even the government across the world, was as perplexed. We had cases where the US president would tweet something and then retract it again. So honestly, it was an unfolding drama that we didn't quite understand. But what I think is important, and particularly what the pandemic has actually shown, is that we still have an educational limitation, particularly in Africa. And many people still today don't know how to dial up information for themselves, and they have to rely on misinformation from the media or misinformation from the pulpit or from the mosque or from the shrine, wherever that is coming up from. We must never forget, I think my job as a 21st century pastor is not to raise people to depend on my thinking, but to raise people to think for themselves. And I'm a big proponent. I mean, that's why I even consented to being on the panel, because I feel interfaith dialogue is something that is lost on us, but we can have more of these conversations to shape what will become an outcome of a better society. So I would say we need, as a matter of fact, to engage, to encourage dialogue where people can get more information other than the dogma or the doctrine that they've embraced and they practice. I mean, every dogma or every doctrine, it's at best people's experiences or understanding or interpretation of events, of reality, or the understanding of God. But there has to be the sense where when we meet together and have conversation, we enrich the society because of that stuff. So conspiracy theory is always going to be with us. Religion and technology has always had conspiracy. But if we look in the 1900s, when we had the bubonic plague, the bubonic plague was something too that perplexed the world. It had a high rate of death rate. But a couple of years back, a group of scientists went to exhume a few bodies. They took a specimen and they carried out a research. What they realized was that close to 50% of the specimen who died of the plague did not have the plague. But what they died of was actually more as a result of fear that was due to the plague. More people died, or as many people died because of the fear, as much people died due to the plague. So what was important was to basically steer people away from fear, but as much as possible, encourage people to turn to God. Spirituality, for me, it's an important tool or important dimension of existence when it comes to crisis period, because you can't look to the bank, you can't look to the doctors. Doctors were out of answers, scientists were out of answers, the government didn't have answers, pastors were grappling with realities, priests and even the imams were also grappling with answers. Do I think we found the answers now? I don't think so. But I would say we owe it to one another for conversation, not just conspiracy theory. Conversation over conspiracy theory. I mean, when you bring the conversation to the table, maybe I'll get a strand of enlightenment and get an enlightenment from what you're saying that I may not be privy to within my own sect or within my own community. So we do need to have those things, not just for this plague and crisis that will soon pass, but for every society to flourish. We need to encourage interfaith dialogue to keep the society and keep the people stirred up in a positive outlook when things happen like this.
Thank you. Abdulbasit, there's something that perplexes me, or rather, that I don't see a solution for. Now, moving away from conspiracy theory, and I'm talking about when maybe the dictates of faith now actually contradict required by public health. The example, of course, the obvious example, we've seen it here in Nigeria, we've seen it in the US, when you're on lockdown and the government has insisted on places of worship being closed. And of course, both the worshippers and the religious leaders are objecting to this, and in some cases, they are actually disobeying the government injunctions. Is there a way to cut through this, or is it just going to be a permanent dilemma? Is there an intellectual approach that we can use to dig ourselves out of this?
Yes, that's actually a very good question. I have to say that just listening to my other panelists, I'm just seeing the similarities actually in the way that the different religions responded to this pandemic. But to answer your question, uh, not just Islam, Christianity as well as the indigenous African religion, they are usually communal religion. Communal religion where people gather from time to time to actually worship together. And that community, that sense of community, is something that is embedded in people's life. So in the case of Islam, for example, I mean Muslims are obligated to go to the mosque to pray 5 times daily. And also during this pandemic as well, this pandemic happened very during the time of Ramadan. Ramadan is one of the pillars of Islam, and it is the that's this period where Muslims actually engage in fasting, and then they engage in communal gathering, listening to clerics' exegesis of the Quran, listening to engaging in devotional practices. Um, and then this pandemic as well also affected the pilgrimage. So pilgrimage, Hajj, is one of the pillars as well of Islam, and Muslims are usually encouraged to travel to Saudi Arabia to engage in pilgrimage during Hajj, and also engage in what in Islam is called Umrah, which is the lesser pilgrimage. So all of this is showing our community is actually very is significant. So when immediately the pandemic started, this sense of community was threatened. Some of the ulamas, they actually have the view, they are of the view that the mosque and the sacred places of worship should not be closed. And the reason they have this view is they actually believe that as Muslims actually engage in whenever want to engage in a devotional act of practice, we usually do what is known as wudu, which is ablution. You know, we cleanse our body with water and all of that. The question of personal hygiene and cleanliness is very important to the Muslim faith, the practice of Muslim faith, and I think it's important to all religion. So some scholars argued, some clerics argued that on the basis of this personal hygiene, they believe that Muslims should be allowed to go to the mosque because the moment they engage in this personal hygiene, it will actually probably shield them of this pandemic. But then this position actually it negates what the public health officials, the adversary of public health officials. So public health officials believe that this act of cleanliness is not enough to halt the interpersonal transmission. So it took a while for the community and even both the clerics as well as the general Muslim public to readjust their notion of community. I mean, some had to improvise. Some of the ulamas, and I think this is where technology actually helped because in the past, during Ramadan, the scholars usually gather their followers in a mosque and then they will read some sections of the Quran and do exegesis. But then, in place of this communal gathering, technology now became important. So people had to listen to their scholars via Facebook Live, on Telegram, But then technology is also class based. It's not everybody that can access technology. So for those who couldn't access technology, they had to rely on radio transmission. So some of the ulama, they also make sure that their programs are also being televised on TV, and they're also being broadcasted as well on the radio. So different people had to improvise. Then when it's during the time of the Eid, the time of the because usually after 30 days of fasting, there's the final celebration where people gather together to feast. This particular act itself was also it couldn't take place as well because of the pandemic was still in place. So people still had to improvise. Different clerics came up with different ways of fulfilling this action, this religious obligation. I think what is central and important is, in spite of the rupture and the chaos that the pandemic actually spawned, clerics they played a big role because they were able to keep the communal cohesion, the communal social cohesion. They were able to keep that sense of community together, keeping the communal cohesion not just in terms of faith, but in terms of also addressing the needs of their followers, like providing palliatives, sharing palliative to the followers. So the clerics were able to keep this sense of community because the absence of this sense of, or the fracture of this community, it actually has a lot of emotional as well as psychological effects. I mean, some believers, they couldn't, some believers actually fall into depression. Some believers, with living alone or not having that sense of community they've actually been used to. But I think the clerics were able to do their best, and I think they ought to be commended for what they did.
Thank you. I want to stimulate a little bit of controversy here. And maybe I can come to you, Olajide, and that is that a lot of what we've been talking about at the place of faith is all to do with information about prevention and how to behave, how to avoid getting infected during a pandemic. But some religions, or maybe all religions, they do go further than that. And often there are claims that this particular ministry or this particular religion, this particular leader can go further and can either make pronouncements about the specific scientific nature of what we're dealing with, or even come up with a cure. Do you have a view on this? Does IFA say that it could go as far as finding a cure for during this pandemic?
So I think African spiritualities and other spirituality can actually get uh, solutions and cure to the pandemics if we actually look deep into their spirituality, because this has been done before and we can still do it again, but our people are not ready to look deep down into the spirituality and the cures, the power that we have. We are busy looking up to the Western world for the cure, while they are there busy working on themselves. So during these pandemics, there was a festival going on. We call it IFA Festival for the world. It is during the June, you know, June 6th. So we have to put the festival on hold and actually go deep and find cure, herbs, and do research and stuff. And when we get this formula, we went to Oni of Ife and told him about the formulas and stuff, and he actually did some research too, and used the formula on some patient then, and it works. So he did this video out, go viral, talking about these cures and stuff, and he even gave out the formula. But people started talking that it's not real, it's not this, it's not that, it's not coming from the West, it's not a vaccine, it's cannot work out. So so that is what is actually going on when we try to work hard, go deep try to find this cure, and all you get is, oh, it's not going to work out. Like, people is not even giving you the benefit of doubt because it's coming from a spirituality root, it's coming from tradition, it's not from the West, it's not a vaccine, it's not from the white people. So I think if spiritualities, religions can be given like opportunity to work deeply, to look into the roots, I really believe we can actually do these things because our forefathers did it and it works out. And we still have the resources, we still have the knowledge, to do this. If we can actually go deep into it, I believe we can actually get the cures and preventions of the pandemic.
It's an interesting claim. As a public health person myself, I would say this in response to that comment, that I think modern medicine is quite ready to accept a cure from anywhere. They have no objection to the source cure. I think where the dilemma comes, and maybe I can ask Ferdy to give an opinion on this, is that people don't understand what is required these days of any drug that comes onto the market in terms of proving that it works and also having found it, investigating its safety and its effectiveness. When I say effectiveness, does it work in children? Does it work in pregnant women, elderly people, young people, etc.? What are the side effects and so on? So I think religious leaders may have a role in educating themselves more about that part of the scientific process. When somebody says we have a cure, people want to embrace it immediately. They don't realize that there's still a long process to be sure that the drug or proposed cure is safe. Do you agree with this, Ferdy?
Okay.
Or do you think people should just embrace it once somebody comes up with a cure and says it's
Okay, I wouldn't say all of Christianity, but pretty much the type of Christianity that we have in Nigeria and the one we're raised with has never been opposed to medicine. I think a lot of us are very open to medicine and even the herbs, which is a traditional medicine. A lot of Christians also understand that herbs are actually a gift from God. And God cures and God heals, but He does so even through medicine, whether traditional or Western medicine. It's all the same. But what I think it's that in the bid to seek cure, many people have been misled, many people have taken in poison, and many have lost their lives because a lot of these herbs are oftentimes not taken through KYC or gone through the process of validation. We don't even know what they contain. We don't know what quantity you're supposed to take. So there is many areas that are not regulated, and that's why it's important that in as much as we want to embrace cure wherever cure is found, it's important that we should also allow for the professionals within the ecosystem to come in and give us the professional advice and be sure to say this is something you can take. And for us in Christianity, we are very open to supernatural healing. I mean, even through this COVID period, I know quite a number of people who had experiences where they got well without even taking any medicine by just believing and praying. And I think that that is some of the beauty. But again, it doesn't mean people can get healed through medicine. Not all aspects of our traditional medicine, it's actually diabolical. They are not diabolical. Some of them are actually a gift. I mean, our parents and the generations before now survived on some of these drugs. So I think there is a sense that we should put more emphasis on the fact that, yes, we should open ourselves to embracing medicine and cure. But more importantly, we should do the best we can to ensuring that whatever we embrace is validated and it's not going to kill more people than what we're escaping from.
moving towards the end of this session. I think it will be remiss of us not to finish with maybe a section where I'm sure you all have some very profound lessons you may have learned. I think the pandemic caught everybody, the scientific community, governments, and individuals, caught us all by surprise. And we faced something scary and mysterious. But as the pandemic has progressed, I think we've all learned an immense amount, both about the nature of the disease, but also about the nature of the disease, but also about our role and our responsibility in responding to such a pandemic, our responsibility to ourselves, to our families, and to the wider society. So I'd like to pick your brains and what are some of the maybe the more profound or the more deep things that you've learned from during this pandemic as it goes on. And maybe I can come to you first.
Yes, thank you. That's a very good question. There's so many things that I have been able to learn in person, but I've also been able to observe as well. I think one of the lesson that I actually learned is the spirit of resilience. Because sometimes when we actually face some period of chaos, despair, and uncertainty, we tend to just there's this cloud of are we going to survive this? But then in the midst of that cloud of uncertainty, there's also that spirit of resilience, which I actually saw during this, or which I observed during this pandemic. So that spirit of resilience came in different form. People intensified in their prayers, but then people also went out of their way to help to communicate with families. There was that outreach that was significant. Another lesson for me is actually productivity, even within the period of pandemic. And I have to say, I don't know for others, but the period of pandemic was actually an immense period of productivity for me in terms of my academic scholarship. During this period, I wrote like different articles, academic papers. Some of my articles were actually published on the Republic Journal. I wrote 3 articles. But I also think that the period of pandemic also gave us the opportunity to pause, to look back, to reflect on where we are coming from and how we actually got to where we are. Because there's been a lot of the world actually was in a period of relaxation. The pollution of the air in terms of climate change. There's this global race that everybody just wants to do. Everyone wants to engage. So this period of pandemic actually gave us that period to pause, to reflect on where we're coming from. It gave us that period of rethinking as well. And then lastly, I would say that for me, I think it actually helped to shed some ingrained belief. So the Northern Nigerian experience, Northern Nigeria has actually experienced some, there's this pervasive skepticism about Western biomedical intervention in Northern Nigeria, especially in the Muslim community. Part of this is also tied to the case of the FISA case, the FISA pharmaceuticals in Kano. But I think this period of pandemic, I think it's actually helped to shed that suspicion because now people now begin to believe that there's no enemy out there that is actually actively plotting and engaging in different schematic plans to assault the Muslim community, because people could see that the pandemic is global. It's affected everybody. It's affected China. It's affected Iran, it's affected Saudi Arabia, America, millions of people died. So people begin to believe that, there's really no active enemy out there. But before the pandemic, there's this belief that people do have, even the cleric as well as the general Muslim public, that, some of this Western biomedical intervention cannot be trusted because they insert some plan or some scheme assault the Muslim faith. But I think this particular period actually helped to also shows the ability of we humans to be able to improvise and to be able to cope as well. Because in my own life, I've never experienced the period where the Hajj, the year annual pilgrimage, or even the 2 holy mosques, for example, in Saudi Arabia. It has never been closed down. It has always been very, very open and active for believers in the Islamic faith to worship. But then in this particular period, we saw a lot of people improvising in a different way and inventing different coping mechanisms. And that for me is actually significant. I think these are some of the lessons I took away from the pandemic.
It's a good point. Olajide, can I come to you and ask you for some, maybe something you have learned, something that this pandemic has taught you with regard to fire society and your role?
I learned a lot of things during the pandemic. First, I learned that everything in this world has cure, like everything. So when the pandemic was going on, there's a lot of pressures going on. If you check my Twitter page, a lot of people have been DM me, messaging me, saying, "Oh, you Babalawos and Ifa said, Ifa has this healing powers and stuff, all these things." So I said, "Okay, everybody, let's calm down and let's work together." So I started doing research and getting closer to the elders and finding things, and it's been amazing. We the communities, if our spirituality community, we actually did very well during the pandemic. Like we come together and make a lot of things together to make sure we are safe. And I believe we actually did it. If our community was safe during the pandemics, so that was number one thing for me. Like everything has cure, we can cure everything, and that's number one. Number two is how people come together in love. I love that during the pandemics. Oh, when before the pandemic, when we go out maybe to the shopping mall or somewhere, there's this discriminations going on, like, oh, you are an evaporist, you are this, you are that. But during this pandemic, everybody just come together, everybody start preaching love. I was like, wow, is this the same Nigerian like we are? I mean, another continent. So it's actually beautiful to see people coming together, leaving the faith aside, and talking about how we are going to do these things together. And it's amazing to me. I love that part too. And the number third things I learned about the pandemic is that both the good and the bad in this world, they are from spirituality. You know, both the pandemics and the prayer we are making. When the pandemics is here, we are praying, oh, God help us on this and that. I believe God already knows or see the pandemics. So the logic between that is between us and God. So when the pandemic was here going on, we are praying to God, we are making things. The Muslim, the Christian are praying, we traditionally are praying, we are making sacrifices and stuff. So I believe that all these things are spiritual, because viruses are something, they are little that you can't see them with our eyes until we use the microscope. So it's like they are spiritual if you look at it. So it's move us close to spirituality. It moves me close to spirituality, and it's even given me enough time during the pandemics to write a lot about the spirituality, the links between spirituality and pandemics going on in the world. So I think I learned a lot of things during the pandemic, a lot.
Yeah, fantastic. Yes, I think we can all bear witness to the positive effect on the communal spirit, and people talk to people you hadn't talked to before. You collaborated with people. You reached out to try and help those in distress, and it's been a very one of the
Yeah.
positive side silver linings of this pandemic. Wow. Ferdy, what lessons have you drawn?
Well, I think for me, the lessons were quite about important things that that the real disease of humanity is not necessarily the pandemic. If anything, the pandemic only exposed what has always been there. I live in Lagos. I have to deal with traffic. I have a young family, and sometimes you don't get to spend enough time with family. So, from this pandemic, it was important to realize that we were a generation addicted to speed, addicted to busyness, and we are always medicated. Therapy is the new spa. We all just need a quick fix. We need energy drink. We need. It's just a high velocity world, and just pulling away from the stress gave me room for a bit more contemplation. So I think for me, I learned a lot. I learned that we need to dial back, reassess our priorities, and define what is important to us. If family is important to us, let's have family time. If the kids are important to us, let's spend time with the kids. If our marriages are important to us, let's spend time with our marriages. Also, I think the other thing that stood out for me was about that we couldn't go to church, right? So we have all these big buildings in Lagos, all the massive cathedrals, all the mosques, all the big places where people go to worship, and you just couldn't go. But it was again to remind us that there's really a difference between spirituality and religion. And for the truly religious people, to close down the churches or the mosque is to deny them access to God. But for the truly spiritual people, God is not a location outside of you. God is always an indwelling presence. So it's then becoming more conscious or more aware of the fact that God is always with you, God is always in you. And I think we're in the 21st century where people are using words, and I honestly identify with that, where we say that I'm spiritual but not religious. And it's speaking of religion more as an evolved, organized institution that has become more about the dogma and the doctrines. And even while there's nothing wrong in that, but I think it's insufficient to handle the evolving mind, right? So it's important we all come to a place where we can embrace intimacy. We can embrace the intimate experiences that we can have, that faith can avail to us, other than just the activities. Third thing, again, many times religion and many things that we do is addicted to events. But one of the things I find most liberating about my faith, I'm not called to define myself by what I do, where I go. I am. I am. It's a state of being before it is anything I do. And it's so liberating that I don't need to perform my way to become free. I don't need to sacrifice my way to become accepted. I am already free. So and it's important people tend to embrace this beauty of freedom that frees you from all the encumbrances of trying to attain, be, do, have. I do because I am. I don't do to become I am. I do because I am. All that I do, all that I am flows from what I am and who I am. So it's about stripping away the labels. I mean, people are so caught up to titles. People are what they drive, they're where they live. All these vanity metrics can't hold anything. I mean, we have wardrobes filled up with clothes that we couldn't wear to anywhere because one best couldn't just have the day, right? So we go to Ashlebi, we didn't go to the weddings, right? Everything became virtual, and you just start to rethink the world that we now live in, where we have embraced a model of business that is about the bottom line, not about the impacts, where people are used as a means to an end, where we rather love things and use people instead of loving people and using things. And let's even be reminded that love is the central message in many religions. And I think love is where I find most intriguing, that you and I can find acceptance, can show love to people who can give nothing to us, who are not who are on the bottom of the food chain. Our responsibility to society is to contribute to human flourishing, to demonstrate that there is still God is available in us and through us, to love the world. We are called to embrace the world the way Christ has embraced the world. And if you think about it, one of the fundamental premise of Christianity is about loving your neighbors, right? And, Christ spoke about it, that if you've done this thing to somebody who can't do it back to you, if you clothe the man who has no clothes, if you feed those who have no meal or can't afford to feed, you fed me, you've clothed me. So the definition of Christianity is your ability to love the other. By you loving the other, people know that you are indeed one with him. And we have embraced a form of religion that takes love out of the picture. We need a new understanding of religion and a new understanding of spirituality that is central, that love is central to what we do, and not just the being right or wrong or embracing the dogma but not having the life. So it's a redefinition on many levels. It's a new normal, right? Even the corporate world, people are seeing that the remote is becoming the new way to go. In enterprise, people are losing jobs. So you just have to find ways to adapt to a changing world, adapt to technology. So religion is not defined by where we go, it's who we are. We are always with God, we are always in God, and God is alive in us. I mean, that's the beauty. And I was so happy to rediscover that, or be reminded of this essential truth.
Thank you. Again, very, very affecting, and again, another message of fact that one of the positive things that came from the pandemic has actually been people rediscovering what is really meaningful, what is really important in life, and things like communal spirit and love and collaboration. Before we go, it wouldn't be fair if we didn't take a few questions from some of our viewers. First of all, I think if I can come back to Abdulbasit, we have a lady, Adeola, from Oshogo. She wants to know what steps she can take as a Muslim to ensure she keeps safe, but can still remain faithful in her communal prayers. Now, you did partly address this in the importance of the communal aspect of it, but are there any specific steps, or are there any areas in the holy books that give people sense of security in terms of when they're doing something different? Maybe they've been forced to let go of the faith by a circumstance. Any more specific advice?
Yes. So what I would say is very important for us to actually look back at the figures in Islam that we as Muslims actually take as model, and the best of them is the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. It's very important for a Muslim to actually go back and look at the life of the Prophet. That how did the Prophet himself, how did he deal with the pandemic of his time? So it's very important for, first and foremost, take your health very, very, very serious. Take your health, take all the necessary health precaution. And number two, it's also very important to have faith as well. Faith in the sense that you are taking your precautions, but then faith actually overrules all of these precautions. So it's very important as well to find a way of maintaining that communal cohesion. There are different ways you can do that now without necessarily that physical presence in the sacred space. You can actually do that by listening to lectures of different clerics online. You can also do that by also using that period as well to nurture your Islamic education and actually knowing your religion. Now, it's very important because most people that actually practice religion, whether Christianity, Islam, or indigenous religion, they actually practice the religion because they were better than that religion, but they've not really engaged in that self-discovery of wanting to understand, why do I believe in what I believe in? Why do I engage in some certain aspect of spirituality that I do? Am I doing it because that is what is common in my environment, or am I doing it because my parents were Christians or my parents are Muslims, so they nurtured me with those values and ideals? So I think this particular period is a period for that introspection, that self-reflection. So go in within yourself and try to actually understand, why you are actually believing what you believing in, and also why you are practicing, knowing some of the basic knowledge, of the faith. I think this is a very, very good time to do that. And lastly, I would say that this particular period is also a period as well to connect with the scripture, with the Holy Scripture in Islam, which is the Quran. So most times, read the Quran, ponder, reflect on the Quran, but then don't just read the Arabic. If you don't understand Arabic, it's very important for you to also find the English translation and then understand what you're reading, reflect on the stories in the scripture. I think this period is the period we really need to do that, so that by the time we're coming out of the pandemic, you're coming out as a new human being, who is not just a robot, who is not just programmed to act the way he or she is acting because of communal conformity. But then you will be rest assured that whatever you're practicing, you have that full conviction, and you can actually you internalize why you're practicing what you're practicing, and you're not just doing it out of imitation or by bets or by communal conformity. I think this is the perfect period to actually engage in all of this self-reflection and introspection.
Thank you very much for that. And I think, in fact, that's such a good answer. I think it would also apply to any faith. I have a question from Obina from Onitsha. but it's a very specific question about some certain remedies. So I think the best thing to do is to ask Olajide, how can people get hold of you? Whether can they come and meet you?
I'll say they can reach out to me on my Twitter account. It's actually very active. So you just have to check at Oluwo Jogbodorumila. Oluwo Jogbodorumila on Twitter.
Can you spell that, please?
Oluwo is Oluwo. Jogbodo is Jogbodo. Jogbodo. Orunmila is Orunmila. So that's Oluwo Jogbodo on Twitter, on Facebook too. So we can talk on the timeline, on the DMs, what they want to know. I can actually teach them online, that technology have make everything easier. They don't have to travel to anywhere to learn anything or something. Just we can talk some video like this. I'll put them through to anything they want to know about the spirituality and stuff. So I think that is more easier than any other thing.
Thank you. And I also have a question for Bertie. Joshua from Kaduna. He wants to know, this is, by the way, the advert slot, so we're giving you an opportunity to maybe say a little bit about your ministry. He wants to know more about
Okay, so thank you, Joshua, for that question. So I run the tribe assembly. It's both in Lagos and Abuja, and it's really about is a church, but we understand that we live in the postmodern world, and for us, we have spent time to develop practices around our faith that can help us be more in touch with the world. We're very big on cultural renewal, how we can use the gospel as a tool to shape how we live, how we love, how we do our businesses, how we raise our children, our families. It's not something that is a concept in our head, but a reality that applies in everything that we do. We're also very big on social reformation, on societal reformation, and I think that any religion that cares about the souls of men but not the conditions in which they live is actually an aborted, is a failed religion. It's an impotent religion. So I believe more than anything else, religion should allow for us to actively engage in how we can shape social structures or contribute to what can become the flourishing of society and the flourishing of humanity. We also believe in personal transformation, that at the end of the day, our journey of faith is an inward journey of discovering our oneness and our union with God and allowing that to express all we do. We're the youthful environment, very big on creativity and culture. The message will remain the same, but the methods will change. And it's about not just staying in touch, but also being more effective in how we engage. So I think that's just my plug-in. You can check us. This is the Tribe Lagos and Abuja on Twitter. Then my own personal handle is Adimefe. I love questions on faith. I'm a technologist as well. I'm an entrepreneur, and I'm also a culture architect. So I basically work to create cultural templates for companies and for churches and ministries and even institutions of faith. I believe that if they should come alive, they should not be stuck in a book or stuck in the eras of the past. They should be more alive and if adaptive to the world in which we live.
Thank you so much. And I think that is a good note, perfect note on which to finish. I think you panelists have been really wonderful. I've learned a lot, and I think what I will do is I will go and sit down. I will now watch all of us again. We'll go through the whole discussion again, and this time I will take notes. Gentlemen, thank you very much for your contributions to Ake Arts and Book Festival 2020 online. Good afternoon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
If you ever need a new place to go, you can join me in a world of words. Many seems like I'm nowhere to be found. If you look, you'll find me in a book. Let's take a ride to the past in the back of a phoenix. Let's float around the moon. You'll never be alone. Now you know where to look. Find me, find you, find the world in a book. You'll never be alone. Now you know where to look. Find me, find you, find the world in a book.
We don't just think of ourselves as a bank. We think of ourselves as corporate citizens with responsibility for growing the economy. Reading and education is a key part of it. But equally important is having access to reading materials at home. A lot of the intervention we've done throughout this COVID is to ensure that people can safely navigate the uncertainties of the COVID crisis and come out of it ready for, to live again.
Let's take a ride to the past on the back of a phoenix. Let's float around the moon.
The dreams that we have are limited by what we have directly interacted with. What reading does is it makes it possible for you to begin to live in worlds that don't yet exist. One read creates a discipline of reading. One read puts me on a timeline. It gives me an important book and I have an opportunity to read it and to collaborate. It's almost like having someone who does your book selection for you. If you have editors and people who are really good at this saying to you, this is the book for the month, I value that. I want to be able to read in a community. I want reading to be a collaborative thing. I want reading to be a communing, and One Read allows me to do that. I will use One Read any day, anytime.
Sticky, spicy, sweet.
I want to go then.
Don't touch me. I will get you arrested. Very, very easy. Relax, everybody.
He shot you.
That 5 minutes madness only you can understand. Visit myspectre.com to get your Spectre experience. Spectre, loans in 5 minutes.
Don't ruin your special moment. Shop now. Altmore.